What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be looking at the Open Great League once again, and the team that we're going to be taking a look at today is PILOSWINE, Dragalge, and Dedenne. Now, PILOSWINE, either one. This thing is actually a really interesting core breaker, especially in the meta that I'm currently seeing at low veteran rank. I'm seeing a lot of teams either weak to ice or like double weak to ice, and so I'm trying to take advantage of that, but I'm also seeing an increase in like poison and electric. So I decided maybe it would be cool to have that ground typing, but with that ice type pressure. And honestly, you're going to see in this video, it worked out really, really well. And then if you just go down the board, the core between PILOSWINE and Dedenne is really, really solid. Very, very similar to that of like Gligar. With Dedenne, and then Dragalge as your safe switch to bait out any grounds that Dedenne doesn't want to see, and then it has that Aqua Tail coverage, much like Drapion would in a safe swap position. So without further ado, let's hop into some battles. Alright, terrible lead in the first match. PILOSWINE into a Primeape. I'm going to safe switch into my Dragalge, two Pokemon on the back that resist fighting, and in comes a Dunsparce. So this is okay to lure out because maybe they don't have the best ground answer, but they have a Pokemon with ground type coverage in Dunsparce. But one Drill Run is not enough to KO Dragalge here. Dragalge has some decent bulk, and I'm actually going to be able to outpace to a second Outrage before my opponent can make it to a second Drill Run because they were a little bit slow on that swap. That does, however, mean they can get the full farm down, but my opponent was worried about me getting to another Aqua Tail, so they actually throw their energy, which is even better for us. In comes the PILOSWINE. PILOSWINE can take one neutral Drill Run here, that's fine. My opponent ends up going for a Rock Slide. Yes, Rock is super effective on ice, but it's neutral on, or it's resisted on ground, making it neutral in total against the PILOSWINE. They end up sniping with the Primeape, but I don't think they're going to snipe with a close combat, so I call a Rage Fist bait. It is just the Rage Fist, and now I have the alignment that I need. So in comes Dedenne. Dedenne will shield up the first charge move and then go for a Parabolic Charge to boost my defense, and I will double shield in this matchup because I know I can outpace by one singular turn, I believe, in this matchup, and I can. Making it to the second Parabolic Charge, this will be enough to pick up the knockout. And yeah, so it looks like the Primeape doesn't get KO'd there, which is why you see me instantly pivoting into my PILOSWINE here. I thought the Primeape basically didn't get KO'd, and I was going to need to save my Dedenne for later. It ended up being a Feraligatr in the back, which needed to get to back-to-back charge moves, so I was able to Powder Snow down, but I was still able to take that win. But a very strange visual glitch there. But into the next match, we have a Goodra on the lead, which is a fantastic lead, weak to ice. They safe switch into an Azumarill, and I respond with Dragalge. Now, you might be wondering, why did I come in with Dragalge here instead of Dedenne? Dedenne is an electric against a water type. That seems like a very obvious matchup. And the reason is that Dedenne has play into Goodra as well, so I don't really care as much if I throw away my Dragalge to win switch. However, I do know that I can at least win the ones, even straight Aqua Tail in this matchup, just because the acids add up so much and their bubbles are resisted. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go for back-to-back Aqua Tails here, and if my opponent decides to let it go, then that's fine. This is the one shield scenario, so that is perfectly okay, and it's going to be up to my opponent. Do they want to get my Dedenne an energy lead? And the answer is no. So I do end up taking switch. It ends up being a Venusaur in the back, so good thing we took switch. We can align our PILOSWINE, but because their fast move is double resisted here, it allows me to get to an Outrage. My opponent didn't think I got there. They let it go, and now I have the alignment that I need. You're going to see in this matchup, I'm actually on Stone Edge. This was just the first matchup I think I played with this team, and it was an accident. I meant to be running high horsepower, but I am in all the other matchups. So, but after that one connects, basically we were able to take that win with only two Pokemon in use. Into next match, fantastic lead. Electric has, Bellybolt specifically has absolutely nowhere to go on this team. Sucker Punch is resisted, and both of its charge moves are resisted on PILOSWINE and Dragalge, whereas Sucker Punch is resisted on Dedenne as well as both of their charge moves. So kind of a tough Pokemon to run into this team, but it actually looked like they were on Thunder Shock, so it doesn't really matter. They're completely walled by all of my Pokemon, which is pretty impressive. I do shield up the first in case it is the Earthquake. It is just the Rock Tomb on the Fortress, and now I'm able to maintain switch and boost my defense. My opponent ends up coming back with a Belly Bolt, maybe realizing that their Belly Bolt has absolutely nowhere to go except for a neutral matchup between two electric type Pokemon, except we have covered that they do not. So here comes a neutral play rough. They've boosted their defense, so that doesn't do as much as we would like, but I'm going to take this next charge move, and then I'm probably going to pivot back into my Piloswine, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. We end up baiting out in a Azumarill, which is kind of unfortunate. Would have liked to bait it out with the Dragalge, but at this point, once that high horsepower connects, I know this game is over because they're in acid farm down range. I'm even going for an Icicle Spear here and making it obvious I'm not going for the high horsepower, hoping that my opponent no shields, but they do end up committing the first shield. I'm just going to come in with Dedenne. I do get one turn lag, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I may as well just sacrifice it then because why not? And now in comes Dragalge. They are already at another charge move, but at this point they will be energy dry. So can I get the full acid farm down is the question. It's gonna be close. It looks like the answer is no, so I'm forced to throw energy, but fortunately I'm acting back-to-back Aqua Tails here, so if my opponent shields, I can just instantly click the move, and Aqua Tail from this range, winning CMP, will pick up the knockout on the Azumarill, and then it's Belly Bolt, which is completely walled up against a Dragalge, which all we have to do is make it to a single outrage. Aqua Tail, it's non-stab, it probably wouldn't KO from this range after their defense is boosted. They realize they can't outpace, so they just resign the match. Another fantastic lead, weak to ice again. My opponent is going to safe switch into Gastrodon, and that is an issue for my backline. So I'm actually forced to stay in this matchup, but that's okay because we have two answers to flying on this team. I have Dedenne in the back. My opponent, however, has farmed to the Earth Power, which means I do need to respect this because I need to maintain switch. I would really rather not have my Dragalge on their Pidgeot when I could have my Dedenne. Especially if they come in with a Mud Slapper, it means they might be double Mud Slap in the back, and that could be really bad for this team. So I end up farming up to back-to-back. My opponent knows I'm at the back-to-back, so they let it go. In comes Drapion, and they're actually pretty weak to the Piloswine. That ground ice coverage coming in clutch. My opponent ends up letting that go. I align my Dragalge there, and now I can come in with Dedenne, make it to a parabolic charge, instantly boosting my defense, and my opponent is completely walled here. Gust, Air Cutter, Brave Bird, all of it's walled. That's the typical moveset for a Shadow Pidgeot, at least. Anyways, they could have Aerial Ace or even Feather Dance if they really wanted to, but even a Brave Bird is not enough to pick up the knockout after our defense is boosted, and they're still not even able to Gust farm me down, which means I'm able to make it to another parabolic charge that picks up the knockout, and now we have our Dragalge up against the Drapion, and that game is a win. Another fantastic lead. This one's even better actually. They are double weak to ice. They pivot into an Azumarill, and this time I will come in with my Dedenne because my Dragalge, it's not like I need to throw it away per se. It has neutral, or it has super effective Aqua Tails for the Gligar, and I know there's no chance I can lose switch in this matchup, so not really worried about it here. I can also overfarm, boosting my defense for a second time and picking up the knockout with the parabolic charge. This will pick up the knockout, and now in comes the Gligar. And the Gligar's issue here is Fury Cutter is resisted, and our defense is double boosted, which means they have no ability to farm me down, and I'm able to make it to these play roughs. They're forced to throw this energy, but it has to be a dig in order to pick up the knockout, because Aerial Ace, it's resisted, our defense is double boosted. We survive that in the red health range, making it to another play rough that actually connects. They do eventually get the full farm down, but Dedenne has put in so much work in this matchup, putting the Gligar into the red. I will let one go. I know they're at back-to-back moves at this point. It is just the Aerial Ace, and now I will commit the shield on the second charge move in case they are ABA weak to the Piloswine in the back. And what's it going to be? It is the Dedenne, so we actually have two answers to it left. They only farm up to a parabolic charge here. This is double resisted, so I will just let that go. And yeah, after my opponent throws that energy, they realize they made a mistake, so they just resign the match. Another Gligar lead. I think there was loads of Gligar leads because there was a lot of Mud Slapper leads the other day. But anyways, my opponent safe switches into a Jellicent, and once again, we have the perfect Pokemon in the back to respond to this Jellicent, I can now survive a Shadow Ball pretty comfortably because we've boosted our defense. Shadow Ball does connect. It does not pick up the knockout. I'm able to make it to another parabolic charge on the CMP tie with my opponent's Surf. This will pick up the knockout on the Jellicent, and back in comes the Gligar, and you're going to see the exact same issue for this Gligar. I'm able to make it to a play rough before they're able to get to the full farm down. This connects, and actually my opponent ended up throwing on the CMP tie, which is really unfortunate. Dig does pick up the knockout, but in comes PILOSWINE, and it is a Feraligatr in the back. So this game is over. They don't even farm up to the Ice Beam, so I'm definitely just going to let this go. I know I can survive one Hydro Cannon very comfortably. I'm going to overfarm here. Now I'm baiting with an Aqua Tail, expecting my opponent to shield because their Feraligatr is kind of their only win con left in this matchup. They need to leave this matchup with energy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to at least commit one shield in order to try and pick up the knockout here with another Aqua Tail. My opponent ends up double shielding, and now in comes PILOSWINE. I can shield this up, and now I can pick up a knockout with an Icicle Spear here. I just have to watch for a catch. So I'm overfarming. My opponent ends up going for the catch. I'm actually able to get the full farm down on the Gligar, come out with a high horsepower loaded, and my opponent just resigns the match. There's the Mudslapper lead we were talking about. Marowak on the lead, and my opponent is staying in. So clearly they are core broken. Something in the back is also weak to PILOSWINE. I cannot wait to see what it is. But my opponent commits a shield, and then they end up throwing on alignment right away. So I'm going to commit the shield right back because I know I can always win switch in this matchup, and in comes a Wigglytuff. And yes, I did just switch a dragon into a fairy type. I know it's absolutely absurd, but Dragalge is really awesome this season. So able to connect with an Aqua Tail. I would like to maintain switch here, but my opponent does make it to a charge move, and I think this will be enough to pick up the knockout. Yeah, Icy Wind, definitely going to pick up the knockout there, but we've grabbed a shield from our opponent, we've put them in the red health range, and now Dedenne can get an energy lead, and Dedenne with an energy lead is absolutely terrifying in this cup, even with a Mudslapper on the lead, because we have a charge move loaded, so my opponent can't commit the shield, but they do commit the shield, maybe forgetting how much energy we had loaded on the PILOSWINE. Now able to snipe, pick up the knockout, and what's in the back? It is a Drapion, and yes, my opponent was ABA weak to the PILOSWINE, which is absolutely massive. One Aqua Tail gets shielded, we can outpace to the high horsepower by one turn, or by 2 turns technically, and high horsepower is massive super effective damage. It picks up the knockout, and we are able to take that win. PILOSWINE into Dedenne. This is another great lead, and my opponent once again is staying in, and the reason they're likely staying in this matchup is because of that extremely common core. Dedenne plus Gligar was absolutely everywhere, so this is why I decided to bring out PILOSWINE. PILOSWINE now able to make it to the high horsepower, even on a boosted defense that one-shot the Dedenne. And in comes Wigglytuff. I'm going to end up pivoting into my Dragalge, checking for a Gligar in the back, but my opponent actually doesn't switch into their final Pokemon. Instead, they're going to stay in this matchup with their Wiggly. And I'm wondering if I've made a mistake. If Dragalge had play into their Pokemon in the back, and after they commit that shield, I'm thinking, yeah, I definitely made a mistake. What could be that final Pokemon? My opponent does end up getting the full farm down, but now in comes Dedenne. I want to get an energy lead here if I can. I'm actually able to outpace to the charge move. This will be able to pick up the knockout on the Wigglytuff, and now we have a 2-shield advantage and a boosted Dedenne. What's in the back? It is the Gligar, so my opponent may be reading that we were checking for the Gligar in the back, but now I'm able to connect with a Play Rough, and we still have the PILOSWINE for double super effective damage. I'm definitely not going to shield anything on my Dedenne. My opponent realizes they don't have a win con, so they just resign the match. Into the next match, Furret on the lead. I'm going to stay in this matchup and chip at least with an Icicle Spear before I get out into my Dragalge. Dragalge, of course, if we could get a catch of a Trailblaze, would be absolutely massive because that is double resisted. So that's exactly what we're going to play for. I'm going to end up throwing my second charge move as soon as I get to it, because that means I'll be able to outpace my opponent by 2 Sucker Punches. So they'll need to go for 2 Sucker Punches to get to the Trailblaze, so I'm going to go for the catch. I'm unsuccessful. It looks like my opponent held on to their energy. Did we get the catch? No, we did not. My opponent reacted in time. They make it to the Swift. They end up re-banking that energy, coming in with another Wigglytuff. We were seeing so many Wigglytuffs in these matchups. People are just wanting to get these matchups done even quicker than before. But we are able to connect with back-to-back Aqua Tails. This will do some solid chip, but it won't be enough to pick up the knockout. And yes, while we do have a shield advantage, I'm just going to sacrifice my PILOSWINE here and run with Dedenne. Because if we think about what was on the lead and what was on the switch, we think that Dedenne should have play in the back. Fairies are very often paired with waters or fires, and it does happen to be a water type in the back, which is absolutely massive. So here comes a parabolic charge that connects. All I have to do here is shield it up and farm up to where I'm 1 short of the back-to-back, because my opponent is 1 hex away from a surf. So I'm going to connect with a parabolic charge. I'm 1 thunder shock away from another parabolic charge, which means we're able to outpace. This will connect. It will pick up the knockout on the Jellicent. Well, my opponent force quit the app, but it would pick up the knockout, and we are able to take that win. And that's another team read thing there. I was expecting either Azumarill or Jellicent in the back, because they had a normal type in the lead, so it had to be something that answered to fighting. And Jellicent just kind of makes sense there. But into the next match, bit of a tough lead. We've got Sandslash on the lead, and this is a matchup where it's nice being the non-Shadow Piloswine, because you can actually make it to a Icicle Spear bait and a high horsepower, unless your opponent throws Charge Move. But at this point, I'm going to commit the shield. I'm now going to go for the high horsepower, and I really need my opponent to let this go, and they actually do, which is massive. We're able to win switch. In comes a Tentacruel, and that's actually massive that we win switch, because now we can align the Dragalge. They are completely walled in this matchup if they're running the typical moveset of either Acid Spray or Sludge Wave with Scald. Unless they're running Blizzard, then they don't really have anything for us. They end up over farming, and they let me connect with an Outrage, which means this game is instantly over. Scald connects. I'm going to instantly pivot into my Dedenne to get an energy lead. What's that Pokemon in the back? It's actually a Toxicroak, but Shadow Toxicroak, and Shadow Toxicroak is so absurdly glassy that I know I can just go straight for a Parabolic Charge. That is way too much damage to my opponent. They know they no longer have a win con, so they just resign the match. Into the next match, Dusclops on the lead. So this is a neutral lead, but it is a neutral lead that we likely will lose, just because Dusclops is a little spammier than we are and a little bit bulkier. So that combination is going to make this matchup kind of tough for Piloswine, but we're definitely going to stay in this matchup because obviously our Dragalge as an acid user doesn't want to see a ghost, which resists that fast move. But you'll notice that I went over farmed right and through right before they got to their next Shadow Punch. That allows me to cycle reset my opponent, meaning that if they want to throw on good timing, they need to go for an extra hex, which means because I'm 1 away from the back-to-back, I'm able to force them to go for that and make them make a shielding decision before I have to. We end up soft losing the lead, which is fine, because that allows me to get an acid farm down, a resisted farm down, to come out loaded with energy on the Dragalge. And unfortunately, winning switch was very crucial, because my opponent has a Mandibuzz in the back and a Wiggly as well. So winning alignment here definitely would have been ideal, but this is not an instantly lost matchup. My opponent has 2 shields in play, but so do we, and we are boosting our defense like crazy, so forcing my opponent to commit their first shield of the match. Can I make it to another Parabolic Charge? Not quite. My opponent able to outpace, pick up the knockout with a Swift, but this just sets up farm for the Dragalge, and I do not want them to get to an Icy Wind to permanently debuff me, which is why you see me throwing my energy here. They let that go. That picks up the knockout. In comes the Mandibuzz. I will respect this damage because I'm worried about a Dark Pulse. They end up baiting me with an Aerial Ace, which is a pretty nice bait, but I don't expect them to bait twice. So I'm actually going to commit the shield in this matchup. It is the Dark Pulse, and now no baits here, full sending the Outrage. This will do some pretty sizable chip to the Mandibuzz, actually puts it below the yellow health range, and now they're in Acid plus Aqua Tail range. So spamming out these Aqua Tails, just have to make it to 1 more before my opponent is able to get to their next charge move, and I am going to end up throwing on the Sandpitai to pick up the knockout with the Aqua Tail. No, my opponent survives on 1 HP. Can we survive a Dark Pulse here, and do they have the back-to-back moves? We survive the Dark Pulse, but they do not have the back-to-back moves, and we are able to take that win. Into the final match of the video, and a core breaker on the lead. This is a tough lead for this team. Jellicent resisting the acids and have super effective Surf for the Piloswine while also resisting Powder Snow. So very difficult Pokemon. My opponent ends up staying in and to chip with a Shadow Ball, end up shielding that up, which seems to be a pretty decent call, because in comes Clodsire, and Clodsire is a great thing to bait out. Our Dedenne absolutely does not want to see this, and being able to bait this out with Dragalge is huge, because we can chip it with loads of Aqua Tails, and this burns the switch clock, which means I can then pivot into my Piloswine, My opponent ends up throwing energy. It is actually a sludge bomb bait, and we no shield that, which is massive. They end up getting to another charge move, but this can only be another sludge bomb, so we'll just let this go. That is resisted damage. We get the full farm down. All of that energy is wasted. We're now able to also outpace the Jellicent to a high horsepower, and this will do massive chip damage. So yeah, my opponent is actually going to end up committing the shield. They're going to overfarm a little bit, now picking up the knockout with the Surf, but that's fine because now we're at an even playing field. Both of us have one Pokemon slightly injured, one that has been completely KO'd, and in comes Dedenne to get an energy lead, and it's a Furret in the back, which is absolutely massive, instantly boosting our defense here. I expect my opponent just to instantly boost their attack, so that it becomes more neutral again, and that's exactly what they're going to do. But I have the pacing advantage here, so I can actually make it to another parabolic charge that nearly picks up the knockout. One more Thundershock does the job. Back in comes the Jellicent. My opponent will have to full send a Shadow Ball here to do any meaningful damage, and that's exactly what they're going to do. That only does 50% to the health remaining, and yeah, my opponent, after seeing that damage, decides to resign the match. But yeah, I thought the core between Piloswine and Dedenne was absolutely incredible. Piloswine was a fantastic core breaker in the current meta, and then Dragalge as a safe swap. I mean, it really fell into Drapeon's role in this team, and the reason Dragalge is such a good pick for this team specifically over Drapeon is it resists fighting, which Piloswine is weak to. It resists water and fire and grass, which Piloswine is weak to. So the core between those two makes a whole lot of sense as well, covering each other's weaknesses pretty well. So yeah, I mean, the team overall very, very strong. Definitely worth giving a try if you have the Piloswine, especially if you're in my Ela range and you're seeing a lot of teams disrespecting ice type coverage. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me from this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, peace.